This is a 2000 and something Chevy Cruze 1.4 turbo, and it is very sick. Despite only having 60,000 miles on the clock, the engine is making no power. There's a check engine light, and there's a nasty rattling coming from under the hood here. And I'm gonna try and fix all that. I actually worked at a Chevy dealership when this generation of Chevy Cruze was new, and I was really excited about them at first because, neat! It's a new version of the Cobalt, that'll be awesome! And they started coming in for warranty work. They were not awesome. Unfortunately, the dream of a cheap, reliable economy car from Chevy is more or less gone these days. This particular car has the 1.4-liter Ecotec turbo, I think. It's an engine. It's direct injected, it has a turbocharger. And is very broken. The code that we're getting is a underboost code, which sounds a whole lot like the turbo is bad. There's a rattling coming from the front of the engine, which sounds a whole lot like the turbo is bad, and it doesn't make any boost, almost like the turbo is bad. I think the turbo might be bad, but let's see, because I'd like to confirm that before I tell the owner to order a $600 part for this car. Honestly, this looks like a pretty straightforward job. Everything is just right here on the front of the engine. The only part that's going to be a little annoying is probably the oil and coolant drains on the bottom of the turbo. But first, I would like to take off the intake and this heat shield so that I can get a little bit of a better idea what's going on. See if I can see anything majorly wrong with this. See if it's, I don't know, that wastegate feels a bit loose. I'd like to see if I can get a magnet or mirror down there and wiggle the shaft and see if there's any shaft play. It's got this integrated intake elbow, which is kind of annoying, but look at this, it's all E-Torx. So I've got an E11 here and a flathead screwdriver, so we're going to take this heat shield off. I would show you the noise this is making, but I really don't want to run the engine any more than strictly necessary. I did verify there isn't excessive crankcase pressure, so there's not like a hole in a piston or anything weird like that. Just think this turbo is done for, so let's rip the heat shield off and see what we're looking at. Now, if you're one of those people that hates European cars because of all the weird fasteners, then you're not going to find any solace in modern GM stuff because they have the best fastener in the world all over them, and that fastener is E-Torx. There's a whole bunch of these all over the place in my BMW. I absolutely love them. There is a ton of engagement with the tool. Very, very difficult to strip out, but oh no, you've got to buy a socket set. It is nice working on a car this new. I never get to do this. My stuff's all old and junk. Don't worry, I didn't buy this. This is a friend of a friend. The idea is to get this fixed up enough that it can be traded in for a Civic. As you can probably tell by how nice and fresh all this looks, the cooling system was just replaced on this car. It looks like maybe a radiator, these hoses, thermostat. I think these have an electronic thermostat, and it is severely problematic. Oh, fair enough. Let's see. So what do we have going on down in here? Not a whole lot. The turbo is way down behind that curve. I'm gonna grab some needle nose, see if I can get this clip off, see if I can feel that wastegate a bit more, but I think the wastegate actuator is completely trashed. Never mind, needle nose not necessary. Oh. Ooh. Yeah. So that would explain the exhaust leaky smell that I heard. And that's just completely junk. Ugh. What a horrible noise. Well, there we go. New turbo time. Hey, wow, it's an engine. We're in the shop now, and we've gotten a decent amount done. Lots of bolts undone, V-bands undone. I got the wastegate actuator out of the way so I could get all these flange bolts out from around here. Those were all these, well, they weren't bolts. They're nuts on studs, but the studs came out with half of them, so that's fun. What's neat is it's a dual head. You can use either a 10 millimeter or a, what is that, a T30? No, T50. I can't read. We got the oil feed line off, which is here, and that appears to be clogged. So this turbo might have had multiple issues. I don't know if we're going to see any shaft play when you take this off, but there might be, because this thing might have been getting oil starved. You can kind of see in there
That is super gross, and I can't blow air through it, so we're gonna hit that with the compressor, see if we can free it up. We got the coolant feed line off here. Got to use one of my favorite tools for that, the old hose clamp pliers. And then way down in there, there's a 17mm bolt for the coolant return line. I think that's the return line. And that drains all the coolant from the engine mostly onto the floor. So that's fun. Next step is going to be lifting the car up. Oh, also some stuff like, PCV, some random, vacuum lines, that sort of thing. Got the charge pipe off. Next is going to be lifting the car up to get the oil drain line off the bottom of the turbo here. And then there's a brace for the exhaust that needs to come off as well, because the exhaust needs to kind of drop down out of this V-band flange in order for us to get this out, because it's still, it's still pretty solid for whatever reason. And then it's out. And then we can put in the new one, which is over here. It's from Rock Auto. It exists. Wow. Look at that. It looks pretty much exactly the same. It was pretty reasonably priced too, so fun times. And then it also came with gaskets of dubious quality. Very smushed V-band flange gasket. Looks like that's our oil drain flange gasket. Some new crush washers for the coolant, or the oil feed line on the top. And I'm going to assume that is for priming it with oil. But also, discard after use. No, I don't think I will, because that looks useful. Gotta keep that around. The turbo is out. It wasn't too terribly difficult. There's this lip here on the catalytic converter. I just kind of used a screwdriver to get the whole assembly past that lip and then get it past the studs. And I did unbolt. There's a, I guess I'll show you. There is, under here, right there on that stud, there's a 10mm bolt that I undid, and I also unbolted the cover and just pivoted it out of the way so that I could get to the oil drain line fittings on the bottom. Everything else was really straightforward. Just a few hose clamps in slightly inconvenient locations, and other than that, not all that bad. However, when I got underneath there to undo the oil drain tube, I noticed that there was no oil drain tube. All there was this little bit of it sticking out of the engine block. Very mangled. It looks melted, kind of. And then there was just the heat shield kind of sitting there. And then there was this sticking out. And the turbo itself, well, that's not supposed to do that. Also, the housing is cracked. What tipped me off here was that this moved like garbage, and that isn't supposed to be that way, but check that out. Whole housing is cracked pretty bad, and I could see the crack going way back in there. So this thing was just thoroughly hosed. These are kind of cheap turbos. These are just journal bearing. They're not ceramic ball bearing or anything like this. It's an economy car turbo. It's absolutely nothing fancy, but that's got to be some carnage there. So now we've got to go order another part, get a drain line, and then we can start reverse of removaling this back together. And I'll have to learn how to put those drain fittings back into place, because I didn't get to take them off when I was taking all this apart. So another thing that I'm going to check is, once we get this all reasonably back together, is I'm going to crank the engine over with the ignition control, with the, I don't know, probably unplug the fuel injectors, crank it over, make sure that oil squirts out of that feed and that it's not also plugged somewhere deeper in that galley. Other than that though, it's a car. Everything's apart now. I even managed to dig out the little remainder of the drain line that was stuck in the engine, because of course it was. And then we've got our brand new oil feed line here. Comes with new gaskets and banjo bolt, and of course the line itself resplendent in all of its glory. At this point, we're pretty much ready for reassembly. We've got the turbo over here with our coolant feed and drain lines, and our nice new oil drain line, which is
quite possibly the jankiest piece of garbage I've ever seen in a car. This is plastic with a heat shield on it. Why couldn't you just make it out of metal? If they just made it out of the same stuff as that old EGR tube, it would be perfect and it would never have problems because it would be metal. But instead we have this. I still don't quite understand how this failed. It just slagged itself. Definitely going to be reusing the exhaust gasket. This is like this OEM one is like this nice MLS thing. The one that came with this kit is just a single layer, pretty atrocious. But the new parts we're throwing on here came with new gaskets anyway, so well, maybe, yeah, once we get it in, we will use the syringe from the top to prime it with some fresh oil, and then this thing's getting an oil change, and of course it's getting new coolant because the coolant is absolutely everywhere. I also think that the solution to how to get these tightened, these bolts here, with all of this installed in the car is to simply don't do it in the car. Put it on the turbo and then put the turbo in the car. Turbo's in, all of the exhaust manifold bolts except for one are in, and that one is down over here. But before I do that, I'm going to do probably the worst part of this whole job, which is the banjo fitting for the coolant return line. We also got the big V-band clamp done on the catalytic converter, which wasn't terribly difficult. We actually just put a jack underneath the exhaust and lifted it up, and it popped right into place. And everything else is kind of going together here. Clearances on this last one are not fun. We ended up having to loosen every single bolt and pull the manifold away from the block a little bit so that we could actually get it started and get it get it going by hand. I mean, really, what I should have done is actually taken the bolts off of the studs and then threaded the studs back into the block, but I forgot. So here we are, and I don't think I have the right nuts on hand to do the double nut trick, but hey, whatever. So now I get to finish that and then tighten all of these back up, and then it's priming the turbo itself, putting the turbo feed line on, but before we put the turbo feed line on, I'd like to crank it and make sure that we get a good flow of oil out of the feed line, or out of the feed hole. Hook up the coolant feed line, hook up the EGR, hook up this vacuum line, whatever the heck it is, hook up the charge pipe, put the bottom panels back on, and then we're sailing. I hope y'all are sitting down right now because Jake's about to show you how not to be a complete garbage person. Do you see that hose clamp there? That one right there? That little constant tension clip there? See how I put the squeezy bits of it where you can actually get to them and not on the back side? It's just that easy. This one easy step they don't tell you about how to not be a complete trash person. Okay, let's get the charge pipe, reach charge piping, maybe recharged, if you will. That was fairly easy. And then the 10mm nut for this brace. Oh, they got coolant on me. That tastes delicious. One of my favorite flavors.
Pulled fuses 8 and 9, which is the 2, 4, 1, and 3 fuel injectors, which, for those of you who can count, is all 4 fuel injectors. So now we're going to make a huge freaking mess. A little more. Okay, stop. All right, we're good. Cool. So we've got oil, so now we can put on our shiny new part. So the next step is going to be priming the turbo using this syringe, which I've already somehow managed to crack. So hopefully... Yep.
Peed just a little bit.
Yep. Perfect. Totaled. Wonderful. Do I have any... I have carb cleaner. I don't have brake cleaner. What is up with my aerosols lately? Like, what is this? This is just how you clean an engine. I don't know what you're talking about.
Nice.
Clean some of the tools too. Just kind of. Yep. Hey man, you got to keep your tools. You got to keep your tools clean. You know, if you respect your stuff, it'll respect you. What else? What else needs cleaned? The old turbo. We got to clean the old turbo. Oh, let's clean the floor. Screw it. This is all slippery.
Clean the transmission jack.
Oh yeah, yeah. Get all that. This is stupid. Let's do some more. There's no pressure left. I can squeeze it. Yeah! That was the most expensive floor cleaning ever. As it turns out, carb cleaner isn't degreaser. Oh, but degreaser is degreaser. Nope, still a nice skating rink. All right, well, whatever. What were we doing? Actually, the oil line. Here it is. It is splendiferous. You can blow through it. Wow, stuff travels through it. Also, the O-rings, they actually have some O-ring to them. This old one, they were just completely smushed down. There was nothing left. There. Okay, now everything can be tightened down. What's this one? E11? Show is. I'm definitely going to hand torque that bad boy. Want to make sure that those crush nice. There is room for my torque wrench in here. I'd probably use it. I'm sure I could make the torque wrench work. I just don't want to. Oh man, it's gonna hide our nice clean everything. My back! Well, it's everything a growing boy needs. I think it's time to actually start it up. Sounds perfectly normal to me. All right, shut it off. I think that's a successful first start. No more diesel tractor noises. It just sounds like a perfectly diesel-y, tractory, normal Ecotech 1.4, just like all the rest of them. The floor situation can't really be emphasized enough. It's pretty bad in here. You can't just get this from anywhere. This is the primo content that you come to this channel for, because I can spin if I do it right. All right, let's do an oil change or whatever the hell it was we were doing. Coolant, that's right. Where'd it go? So in case you need any more evidence that this car is severely neglected, here's a new oil filter. And here's the old one. Aside from weighing way more, you can see how it's both twisted and bone in on the side. And that would be because this thing is so full of crap and so clogged up that the force of the oil flowing through it was restricted by all the crap in it and just sucked the sides of the filter in. Not a ton of sludge in the filter. That's why I don't leave that on. Somehow magically there's not a ton of sludge in the filter housing. Well, it's done. And I just got done moving like 40 million cars out of the way, so now it's time to go for a test drive. And maybe put my hat back on, because that hair though. This gets to be my life to clean up tomorrow. Low boost, random misfires, system running lean, MAP sensor out of self-test range. Yeah, clear all. Sweet. Check engine light is now off.
Isn't quick trip the other way?
No.
Well, yes, but no, apparently.
I mean, there is a quick trip in literally every direction. There's one 1 mile this way, one 1 mile that way, one 1 mile that way, and one 2 miles that way. Okay. Do we have power? We do. We also have a weird buzzing noise. I don't think that was the turbo. I think that was something in the exhaust, like squeaking. But no check engine lights, and it has its power back, so I think this thing's pretty much as fixed as it's gonna get. This is, the alignment's off. This thing is just a complete hoopty, but now at least it is a drivable hoopty, and that's what you want, I guess. I mean, a drivable good car would be better, but you take what you can get sometimes, I suppose. Thanks for watching.